On this video, I'd like to cover using 3 different tools to selectively adjust for optimal aesthetic quality, and that just essentially means that I want to, the image that I made might need some refinement later on. So to begin with, I'm using Morgan's image, and I mentioned during the critique that maybe the top part was a little bit lighter. You can see how her eye was going up to that particular point. So that's illustrated, as we can see here, with our little the highlight clipping area set here. So if you just want to see what that looks like, once again, you can always turn those off, but they do kind of help you out. So if you have some black areas, that's turned on as well right now. So what I want to do is first kind of go through and maybe do some global adjustments. So when I think about an image, I think about the global, which is the overall, versus the local, which is a smaller area, which would be that top part, where I'd like to go back and adjust that later on. So really quickly, just go through some terminology. Burning means darkening an area, as to where dodging means lightening an area. And then, keep in mind those global to local. So when you're first adjusting your images, always think on a global basis. So what's going on with this particular image? So I'm having a hard time seeing the image overall. I'm going to turn off that clipping layer, and I'm just going to go through some of the things I showed you in one of the previous videos. Once again, you can always hover over the histogram to kind of see where different things are. For this particular image, I'm just going to focus on the overall quality of the image. I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit. Thinking about maybe bringing down the highlights just a touch, and maybe the white areas a touch too. See if that clipping's still up there, so it's still going on. You can see if I go all the way down on the whites, it disappears. That means that there's more detail there, and it comes back in. We'll deal with that later as we go in and using our burning and dodging tools. So I just want to stress that, this does take a lot of time to actually develop these skills that I'm going to be showing you guys to actually refer to the image. So experience is definitely going to help as you guys go through these and get a little bit of feedback. So next thing I want to focus on is I just want to continue working on my global settings. So maybe I just want to open my shadows just a touch more and give a little bit more detail. And after I get my overall density, how light or dark the image is, and it looks pretty good at this particular point. Now, the last thing I do is I go through, I got my global density set, and I go through and add some contrast. I want to add a little bit of contrast to really bring forth those cookies. And last but not least, I just want to kind of figure out, I might lighten this up just a touch. So you can see it's just a lot of different tweaks. What I want to do at this point is, once again, getting back into the snapshots, we'll just do a first version here. Go there. Also want to show you guys in this little toolbar right here, you can always go back to your original camera raw default. So what we're doing, all these different settings that we're doing are laying on top of the image. They're not actually affecting the image they're affecting it just through a layer on top of it, but they're not affecting the underlying pixels. So now that we've got that, I'm going to go back to the original exposure panel. Maybe I'll just add a touch of clarity there for the sake of it. Now I want to turn off this setting. I just want to be able to see the image overall. The first of these, probably one of my favorite for like an edge burn like this. So once again, we're going from the global settings into a more localized setting. So the first one here is this graduated filter. I'm going to click on this graduated filter. There's some time that you guys could spend here. I just want to really stress that you're using these little buttons on the side here. They'll reset any changes that you made on the previous one. So I just want to go ahead and darken this down. So I just know initially, and I would recommend that you stick with exposure and exposure only for the time being until you learn how to control that, and then explore how to use contrast, highlight, shadows in the other settings. So start with one thing and build off that knowledge. Super important when working in all different computer applications. Learn one thing really well and build off of it. So this particular tool is really easy. So what I'll do is I'll just find a point, click, and now I'm just going to drag down here. And I can move the angle, I can move it from left to right. I just want to kind of mirror the overall organization and how this image is kind of constructed. You've got a top half, and it's kind of split more or less along the lines in the middle. So I just want to darken that top half. And what this does is, I can also go on here, and once you get that particular little cursor on there, you can move this up and down, depending upon what looks good to you. So something like that would probably look good to me. Maybe I could do it. But what's going on here is you can barely see this green line up here, but what it's doing is it's going from 100% change on the very top there down to 0%. So it's shifting over this little from the green point to the red point. So I'm just going to pull that down so you guys can see what 100%. So going to pull that down. It darkens as you go. I'm just going to pull that. I just want more of a transition. I want that feathered. Feathered is going to be a word that we're going to note on some of the other different tools here. So I can always go in when I'm selected on this particular tool. I can always go in and continue to change it. I can lighten, darken, and see how that histogram continues to change. So I'm just going to make that change there on the exposure. And just keep in mind that you want to make one change for one tool, and you don't want to try and do, every area is going to need and require a different set of tools. So going from that particular point of view, I'm going to look to the different sides of the image now. And if I want to go ahead and do another graduated filter, I can just automatically do that. It's going to allow me to click and set a new one. If I want to go back to the old one, I have to click on the points. If I want to delete one, I can select back on it, hit the delete key, and it's gone. So it's pretty easy, pretty intuitive, and it's going to show you that white area up on the top there it's going to be located down here, and you can go to mask and you can change that. I'm going to change it to a pink setting, go in OK. And so now when I hover over this, an unselected one, you can see the area that's being affected, what you're doing to that localized change there. So next, I'm going to move into, I might just keep this to 2 of the tools because the third one's a bit more challenging. Is going to be this particular tool. It's the adjustment brush. When I select on that, it's going to just go straight back into the settings that I have. And maybe I don't like that so much. If I just go ahead and click this, you can see it goes into a new setting, -0.50. I'm going to go ahead and do -0.0. This allows me to paint. The thing that I want to stress here is when you look at this tool, it has the outer edge, which is going to be kind of a dashed white line versus the inner white line. That brush power is going to be dissipated or feathered from that particular setting. That's going to be controlled down here. I'm scrolling down here to feather and flow. So right now I'm at 100% feather, and this is how you're going to be changing this. The flow, I'll probably just turn that down a little bit. Density, I'll turn down a little bit. This just think about it as a constricting amount coming out of a toothpaste container. If it has a big hole, you squeeze it, a lot comes out. But if it has a real small hole, a little bit's going to come out at a time. And so the feather, I can go ahead and I might turn that down just a little bit, and you can see that difference between the inside circle and the outside circle is less. So the inside circle, once again, is going to be where it's 100% of what I put in there is going to be coming down. Now I'm just scrolling down. There's a little toolbar on the side here if you're like, wow, there's a lot of settings. You can do a lot with this. I also recommend go ahead and check the auto mask. And this is kind of one of these little tools built in here that understands the definition in areas of contrast, so it won't try and paint in certain areas if you're not trying to apply that change to there. So next up, I'm just going to click and I can drag. You can kind of see how I'm painting that in, go back and forth. With every stroke, it applies more and more. With these, you can always move this particular setting. You can't see it right now, it's kind of hard to see, but I'm moving it across. And then I can just go ahead and hit the delete key if it's activated. If it is colorized, if it's red, then I can delete it. And so what I like to do is actually change the size of the brush, which is going to be here. And this is really dependent. So you want to choose the right size to fit in with the things that you want to be doing. So with this particular setting, what I want to do is I probably want to make this smaller. And I use the bracket keys on the keyboard. That's a quick key command. There are quick key commands, so if you want to learn those, it makes working a lot faster. And I'm just going to paint in this little area. This brush fits a little bit better in there. And then paint a little bit more up here. So try and apply one brush to one particular area. If you want to go to a new brush, that's going to allow you to go up here. So you're going to create a new brush. You see this goes to white. Now you can see the areas that are activated. You can see how that layer mask applies. It didn't go into the dark area there, but the pink is affecting the brighter areas. So now with the new brush, I want to work on a different side. I think it's really good not to try and do all the different changes on one particular brush, but break it up into 3, 4, maybe 5 areas. Different quadrants of your image. Might just darken a little this over here. I'll just go in here, darken that down. I want to go ahead and do a new one. And so I've got all the same settings here. And so maybe I want to turn that flow up, and you can see how these different things work. It will take a lot of practice to learn how these different things affect the image. And so the more time that you spend with it, the better you guys will become with the tools. And I'll go ahead and do one more new one. And I just want to darken this edge over here. So I just want to stress that images as they're shot, can always use a little bit more work. I mean, it's always good to go back in and change some of the different images that you're working on to really maximize the effect and quality of the image overall. So now I want to go ahead and go back to my main panel. I'll scroll back up here. And then a really important thing is once you get into these tools that you learn to use the H key. The H key brings me back to my original panels. So sometimes if you get lost in there, the H key is, the hand tool. It always gets you back in case you go into any of these tools and you want to get out of them. You can always hit that H key. So we're kind of back, and now let's go ahead and save another one. Just get in the habit of doing this. We're going to call this one V2. And then, once again, keep trying different things. So we can look at version 1, a lot brighter. Version 2, we've darkened that. You're going to notice that what happens if you don't have this information, I just want to point out some of these edges right here, you can't bring it back. And this is the problem of using JPEGs, and I'll get more into that later. But there's limitations. The file has been processed, so you're going to notice this little distinction here of like, hey, there's this stair-steppiness, which just means that there isn't that much information there. It doesn't have those transitions to be smooth from one tone to the next. And that's kind of why we're working in black and white in these first images, is these things are going to be a little bit more noticeable. So going back in, if you guys want to do anything, so I go back into those particular tools. So this one's K for the adjustment brush, G for the graduated filter. So if I want to make any more changes, I can go in there, and I can always just go in, reactivate, change like this, and I can re-alter what's going on there. If I don't like how that transition is, I can change that. Once again, we can figure out where that particular image is. We can go back in there, maybe we want too much. We can change some different stuff. We can add things like contrast. But try and limit the amount of stuff that you guys are doing. I just think it's really good to focus on, breaking your image up into different quadrants, focusing those with the different tools that you're using, and then starting to learn how the tools work. It's like someone sculpting stone. You have to use different tools to get into different areas. Much the same here. So it's all about learning these tools, spending some time practicing, and improving the images overall, to really get at that characteristic that you're thinking of when you're shooting the image. And then once again, when you're all done, go ahead and hit done. It's going to save those changes.